All right, hello everybody. Welcome to our next lesson here. This is Terrorism and the Law. This is for 2019 to 2020. Objectives and standards. Excuse me. You will be able to understand the law in times of war, and you will be able to analyze how the government investigates terrorism. And please take a moment there to look over the standards again, please. And desired result. What does the government do to investigate terrorism? So I want you to be thinking about, as we go through this lesson here, the laws that have been put in place to investigate terrorism, how people suspected of terrorism are treated, and then also obviously the questions there that arise with freedom versus security. Do we want to protect our individual freedoms, or do we prefer to keep our nation safe from another terrorist attack? So I want you to be thinking about, the battle there, or the controversy there, that the government has and faces, okay? So the law following September 11th, 2001, okay? For those of you who don't know, or maybe you're not familiar, but our country was attacked on September 11th, 2001, in New York City, in Washington, D.C., and also there was a field where an airplane was taken down by passengers outside Schwenksville, Pennsylvania, in Somerset County, so maybe some of you are out that way towards Pittsburgh a little bit. But the World Trade Center there in the middle picture there, they were attacked by two airplanes in the Pentagon as well, and that's what happened on September 11, 2001. Excuse me. So the United States faced the deadliest terrorist attacks on American soil on September 11, 2001. More than 3,000 people were killed and many more were injured. Following the attacks, the United States government enacted new laws and policies. Those who support the changes say the new laws and policies protect Americans from another terrorist attack. However, those who oppose the changes say that the new laws and policies restrict the personal freedoms of individuals. So the USA Patriot Act. Americans were shocked and horrified of the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. I'd ask you to speak to those who know what happened that day. I know many of you were probably born after this, so were very young when this happened. So speak to your parents, your relatives, even your teachers. Like myself, many of us remember that day very well. And directly following the attacks, President George W. Bush, who you see in the top left-hand corner here, requested new powers to prevent further attacks. He also looked to expand the power of the executive branch, to find those who committed terrorist acts. So Congress passed the USA Patriot Act in 2001. Powers of the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the CIA were expanded, and these included better communications between the groups, wiretapping, expansion of telephones and the internet, and obtaining search warrants for personal and business records to find out for suspected terrorism or people who might be connected with terrorist groups to prevent a future attack. 2002, Congress created the Department of Homeland Security to help the government work against terrorism. And the bottom picture there, that's former governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Ridge, who was selected as the first head of that department. So this involves a lot of airplane searches and when you go to the airport and stuff like that, them searching your bags, border security, and things like that. So freedom or security? Powers that were expanded under the USA Patriot Act caused many Americans to question what they valued more. Their freedoms, such as being spied on or having their phone calls listened to, or their security, being protected in respect to that. Some became fearful that the new powers of the government violated the rights and freedoms of people. Now, this didn't just happen during September or after September 11, 2001. The United States had taken away the rights of people during times of war in the past. For example, two cases here. The Civil War, back in the 1860s, the right to habeas corpus, or to challenge imprisonment if you were under arrest for something, was suspended for prisoners by President Abraham Lincoln there, the top one there, which you may argue is a violation of somebody's rights, or should we do that for prisoners of war during times of war to protect the country? We also have World War II after Pearl Harbor, which, if you're not familiar with, Pearl Harbor was the U.S. military base there was attacked by Japan, leading us to enter World War II in 1941. Japanese Americans were removed from their homes along the western coast and relocated to internment camps. Okay, so kind of like prison camps almost, where they were guarded and had surveillance done on them to protect us from another attack during World War II. Okay, and again, these were American citizens who had their rights taken away from them. You can argue if you feel that was right or wrong. Later on, in the 1980s, they will be apologized to for that by President Reagan, who said that the government was wrong for doing that. But again, the question of freedom or security has been about in American history before September 11th, as you can see here. So expanding surveillance and searches. Due in part to the USA Patriot Act of 2001, the government now has more power to track and intercept communications. This means more surveillance of every American. Law enforcement officials call on a special court under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or the FISA, which is called a FISA court, to gather evidence. Now, this was created in 1978, and the main goal was to authorize surveillance on foreign intelligence, not domestic criminal trials. So some people say that the court doesn't have the power to spy on American citizens, but again, the government has kind of worked around this. Okay? Therefore, the court does not have to follow the laws and rules that other courts do to protect Americans' rights and freedoms, such as right to a trial by jury, freedom to habeas corpus, or the right to habeas corpus. So because it has a different agenda, technically, some people say this is not right. So example, the FISA court can approve the government wiretapping a person's internet, even if the government has shown no probable cause to do so. So they could wiretap your internet if they felt you were a suspected terrorist, and they don't really need a burden of proof to do so. The evidence gathered from a FISA wiretap can now be used in criminal trials as well. So you kind of see where some people get a little nervous about this. Again, maybe you feel this is a good thing to protect our national security. Maybe you feel this is a violation of your rights. Okay, everybody has their opinions about that. The Protect America Act. 2007, Congress passed the Protect America Act. This gave the federal government more power to listen in on telephone conversations, read emails, intercept faxes, and monitor financial transactions. I apologize. President Bush's administration stated the law was necessary for national security, but again, others argued that the law did not protect the privacy of Americans. Terrorism and detention, interrogation, and torture. Many foreigners, especially Arabs and Muslims, have been called in for questioning, fingerprinting, photographing, and special registration since the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. Government officials argue this is necessary to prevent terrorism. Others argue that this targets specific groups of people based on their national origin, where they come from, or their heritage, or religious views, such as being Muslim, which is illegal. They also argue that there have been no convictions based on terrorism for people who have been, investigated for this, only immigration law violations and things like that. Using torture to gain information has been declared illegal in the United States and by the Geneva Convention for prisoners of war. Okay? However, after September 11, 2001, the United States government argued that the Geneva Convention does not apply to those suspected of terrorism or terrorist connections. The reason, you might be saying, well, that doesn't make any sense, Mr. Sweeter. Well, the reason for them saying this, they're saying, we're not fighting a country like Germany or Japan or something like that. We're fighting a group or organization that spreads across many countries. There's people in Afghanistan, there's people in Egypt, the Philippines, Europe, wherever. Okay, even in North America as well, in our own country. Okay, so they're saying this is an organization that has no boundaries, right? Has no borders. So they're not technically part of a nation. So they're not really prisoners of war. They are enemy combatants, okay, is what they basically call them. Now, you may have heard of this before. Many of them were held in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, by the government, where, quote unquote, aggressive tactics were used to gain information. Whether you want to call it torture or if you want to call it something else, again, not debating anybody, but aggressive tactics were used to gain information from these people who were charged with terrorism or terrorist connections. Okay? Over the years, people tried to take their case to court, saying this violated the Geneva Convention, and many times courts ruled that it did not. However, in 2006, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Hayden versus Rumsfeld that Geneva Conventions do apply to those captured or being detained, that they cannot be tortured, and they have a right to, certain legal procedures. Okay? However, the debate remains over what is considered torture or enhanced interrogation techniques, quote unquote, okay? So again, you might have different views about this, or your family members might have different views, that some of you might believe it's okay to use certain things to gain information to protect the country, or you might say, no, it's not. It's never okay to use certain aggressive tactics against people because they're humans and they should be treated respectfully. Okay, again, that's up for you to decide, and you can do your own research on what is right and wrong. Okay, our closure. What does the government do to investigate terrorism? Think about the laws. Again, think about the USA Patriot Act of 2001. Think about the history of, freedom versus security in our country, the Civil War, World War II, and even after September 11th more recently. And think about, wiretapping, surveillance, interrogation techniques and torture and things like that. And that'll help you answer your questions, all right? Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Try your best on the questions that follow. And I hope to talk to y'all soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.